Hey, what's up everyone? It's Brad with the Hodl Fandom. Today we're going to discuss all things related to Marvel's #1, released by Veve as an NFT on their app. The reason why I chose this is that some people might be confused. At first glance, it looks like Marvel Comics #1. Well, is it or is it something different? Well, I'll give you all the details on what it's about, details on the series it's in, how it connects to the comic universe, and then at the end I'll touch on the value of the NFT as I see it. Let's get into it. So here's a crash course to Marvel's #1. This Marvel series was released in 1994, written by Kurt Busiek with visuals done by Alex Ross. This is a 4-issue limited series that covers some of the biggest and iconic events in Marvel history. Well, there's actually an issue 0 as well, but it's very short, almost like a prelude to issue #1. This story isn't though just a rehashing of the original stories, it gives an interesting twist from the human perspective, and the main protagonist is a photographer named Phil Sheldon. One thing I hope you all noticed is the artwork is completely different. It's done by Alex Ross, who is a renowned artist in comics. He's worked for both DC and Marvel. While most comics are created digitally these days with a cartoonish twist, Ross uses gouache and airbrushing, and he wanted to establish a sense of realism in the story, resulting in one of the most beautifully painted comic book series out there. I know we only have issue #1 as an NFT on the Veve app, but the whole story really comes together if you read all issues 0 to 4. The stories really build on each other, and the callbacks are great, especially if you're a Marvel fan, so I'll do my best to break those all down for you. One interesting perspective is in issue 0, which precedes issue #1, our NFT, and covers the original Human Torch story from creation to imprisonment in his concrete tomb to his inevitable escape, all told from the perspective of the Human Torch himself. It shows that his father and creator equipped the tomb with devices to teach the Human Torch about humanity. Issue 0 explores his thoughts, consciousness, and feelings as he ponders his situation in his short life so far. It also foreshadows an allegiance with humanity and the police chief, which will impact his future dealings with Namor. So let's skip ahead to issue #1, our NFT. This primarily covers the original Marvel Comics #1 stories, plus many more early releases from Marvel Comics, but again from the perspective of Phil Sheldon. As we're introduced to him, we see he's part of the group to first discover super beings and calls them Marvels, hence the name of the series. Sheldon is part of the press who's interviewing Horton during the reveal of the first Human Torch. It's interesting to see that we had previously followed the Human Torch story from the perspective of Horton, its creator, and now we see it from the people who he's speaking to. And we definitely see a lot more skepticism than was originally conveyed. This issue also connects the world of Namor and Angel. If you haven't read Marvel Comics #1, the first ever release from Marvel, they just released a whole bunch of separate stories in the early Marvel universe, including the Human Torch, Namor, and Angel, and a few other people who you can really forget about as they have no relevance or impact to any future issues. So this series is more than just a retelling of Marvel Comics #1. It connects even more stories from the past with a different twist. It pulls from stories about the Human Torch from Marvel Mystery Comics issues 4 and 5, including the subway rescue and the melted car scene. It also covers the first Human Torch fight and subsequent truce with Betty Dean as the intermediary, as originally seen in Marvel Mystery Comics issues 8 through 10. We also see the introduction of Captain America and his stories from Captain America Comics issues 1 and 2. And we see the formation of the Invaders from Invaders issue #1. The final scene highlights another fight, a bigger one, between Namor and the Human Torch, as was originally seen in Human Torch issue #5, but in this story we see this is where Phil Sheldon gets injured trying to document the battle. And this is where issue #1 ends, and we see Sheldon in the hospital as he unfortunately lost an eye, but remains adamant to follow and document the story of these Marvels, which he does do in the remaining 3 issues of the story. I personally think having only issue #1 of this Marvel storyline really sells the whole story just a bit short. As you read through the whole collection, issues 1 to 4, as a fan, it's a great reimagining of some of the great stories in the past, with some pretty cool callbacks, and it only gets better as the issues go on. For example, issue #2 touches on some Fantastic Four stories, like the Fantastic Four engagement announcement as seen in Fantastic Four #36, and the wedding of Sue Storm and Reed Richards in Fantastic Four Annual #3. However, the main story, the main focus of Marvel's issue #2 is the rise of mutants and the X-Men, showing an interesting dichotomy in perceptions of these Marvels. On one hand, they loved Captain America, they loved the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, but because mutants were seen as an evolution of humanity, they were deeply feared and hated by humanity. They feared the possibility of being replaced by these so-called monsters. X-Men issue number 14 from 1963 is reimagined here, from the Xavier and Trask debate to the rise of the Sentinels over New York. Kind of a funny cameo here in issue number 2 is Bea Arthur from the Golden Girls. Now, I don't know why she's there, and I know I'm dating myself here, but Golden Girls was a great show, and I'm guessing Alex Ross was a fan as well. As we move on to issue number 3, it reveals sort of a darker side of humanity and how they can also turn on their heroes. It also touches on a ton of different stories in the Marvel comic universe, but its main focus is the Galactus events in Fantastic Four issues 48, 49, and 50. As we move on to issue number 4, similar to the prior issues, this has a ton of great callbacks like the Avengers involvement in the Kree-Skrull War from Avengers 92 to 97, but this issue is focused on creating a different perspective in the death of Gwen Stacy from Amazing Spider-Man number 121. This was a big event in Marvel Comics. This might have been the first time a love interest of a main character was ever killed. It's also a hotly debated topic if Spider-Man actually did kill Gwen Stacy by snapping her neck, or if she was actually already dead before she fell. So all in all, I think it's a pretty good series with amazing artwork by Alex Ross, and I'm a bit disappointed we only get issue number 1 from Veve. Let's touch on the value of the NFT as I see it. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe closer to a month, where somebody on the Discord Omi chat was looking for somebody with comic books experience, asked which was the best ultra rare to invest in, or secret rare to invest in. Journey to Mystery number 85, Marvel Comics number 1, or Marvel's number 1. I responded it's definitely not Marvel's number 1. So don't get me wrong, I don't think it's worthless. So here are some positives about it. The artwork by Alex Ross is amazing. I love his work, and adding realism to comics is done very well. I think if you're a fan of art and a fan of visuals, you'll love this. I think if you're a fan of the old school comics, it's a great complement to your old comics. On the other hand, this is a relatively new issue, released in 1994, and typically age helps assets like these appreciate. You can actually grab all 4 issues 1 to 4, for about $25 plus shipping on eBay, so it's pretty cheap. Also, other recent Alex Ross releases like this here can be found at your local comic book store for about $5, so not that expensive. Also, this story starts with a retelling of Marvel Comics number 1, but it isn't Marvel Comics number 1, it's a complement to it. It's not Journey to Mystery number 83 or 85, or the old Fantastic Four stories. It's a complement to those. We need to remember, first appearances and first issues is a big factor that increase value. And while this references those comics in a different way, it's not the real thing. But it has value to those who do own the real thing, or are fans of them. Here's an example. Here are my Game of Thrones books. I've read all the books, I have all the books, and I'm a huge fan of the books. These are just the ones I could fit on one hand. So, huge fan, not necessarily of the show. The writing got a little sketchy after season 4, but that's a different story for another day. But anyways, these are the books that make the main story. These will always have the first demand from the public because they want to read the story. For those who read it and become fans, they might want to get some supplemental reading material, such as this here, The World of Ice and Fire. This is a supplement to the main story. It adds background information, tying all the things in the Game of Thrones universe together. So these books are like the original comics, like Marvel Comics issue number 1. And this is like Marvel's number 1. It's a supplemental book. Now, I wouldn't go off and start selling Marvel's number 1. As the saying goes, as the tide rises, all ships rise. So as comic values appreciate, so should this. However, if you had a choice to invest in older comics with first appearances or Marvel's number 1, I would pick the first appearances. Not financial advice, just my opinion. Anyways, that's just my personal thoughts on the value of our Marvel's number 1 NFT and a crash course on what it's all about. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.